Should have listened. That's the first thought that comes back to me every single night when I wake up sweating, still hearing those whispers clawing through my head. I should have listened to the old man at the gas station, to the sign hammered crooked into the trailhead, to the way the woods themselves seemed to hesitate before letting me in. But I didn't. And because of that, I'll never be the same again. It started with a dare. I've always been the kind of person who scoffs at ghost stories, who laughs when someone brings up backwoods legends. So when a group of friends joked about the Appalachian Mountains being haunted, full of things you don't want to see after dark, as one of them said, I brushed it off. I'll prove it to you, I told them. One night. Alone. No problem. That's how I found myself driving into the mountains one October afternoon, my car rattling over gravel as the last radio station faded into static. The trees were taller than I expected, darker too, their branches knitting together above the road until it felt like I was already being swallowed whole. I stopped at the last gas station before the trail, a rundown place with flickering lights and a single old man sitting on a stool outside. He watched me with pale, watery eyes as I filled up my tank, and when I went inside to grab some supplies, he finally spoke. You headed up there? He asked, his voice rough, like gravel under tires. Yeah, I said, trying to sound casual. Just camping overnight. The man shook his head slowly. Don't. I laughed nervously. What do you mean, don't? It's just the woods. His gaze didn't waver. Not those woods. I should have listened. But I didn't. By the time I reached the trailhead, the sun was starting to dip lower, turning the leaves into a fiery sea of red and gold. A weathered wooden sign leaned against a tree. The letters were faint, but I could still make them out. Do not stay after dark. I snapped a picture of it with my phone, grinning. Proof for my friends. Another thing to make fun of later. The trail was narrow, winding deeper into the Appalachian forest, the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every step you take. My boots crunched against dead leaves, and somewhere far off, a crow cawed once before going silent again. The deeper I went, the stranger it felt. The forest was beautiful, yes, but heavy, like the air itself carried weight. Every so often, I thought I saw movement in the trees, a flicker of shadow, the suggestion of something tall and thin slipping between the trunks, but when I stopped and looked, there was nothing. By the time I set up my tent, the sun had nearly vanished. The forest swallowed the light faster than I expected, the shadows stretching long and sharp. I struck a match and lit a small fire, watching the flames flicker and dance against the trees. That's when I heard it. Not the wind. Not an animal. A voice. Low. Distant. Whispering my name. Daniel. I froze. My skin prickled cold. The fire crackled, filling the silence that followed, but I knew what I had heard. Someone or something was out there. And that was only the beginning. The first thing I did was laugh. A nervous, hollow kind of laugh, the kind you force out to keep yourself from shaking. It had to be my imagination, I told myself. I was alone, the woods were echoing, my brain was just playing tricks on me. Still, I couldn't shake the sound of it, the way my name had rolled out of the dark in a slow, almost intimate whisper. I threw another log on the fire, the sparks leaping up like fireflies, and sat close enough that the heat stung my face. Beyond the small circle of light, the forest stretched endlessly, black and silent. Too silent. That was the part that got me. Silence in the woods isn't normal. You're supposed to hear crickets, owls, the rustle of small animals moving through the brush. But there was nothing. Just the fire, my own heartbeat, and the thick blanket of quiet pressing down on everything else. After a while, I pulled out my phone to check the time. 8:17 p.m. My battery was already down to 40%, no service, of course. I set it aside, telling myself I'd save the charge for emergencies. That's when I heard it again. Not a voice this time, but footsteps. Crunch. 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 Slow, deliberate. Like someone was walking in a half circle around my camp, just far enough out that I couldn't see them. I gripped the flashlight from my pack, clicked it on, and shined it into the trees. Nothing but trunks and shadows. I swung the beam side to side, breathing hard, half expecting a figure to lunge out of the dark. But there was no one. The moment I killed the light, though, the sound started again. Crunch. Crunch. Closer now. Hello? My voice cracked. Who's out there? No answer. Just the forest, pretending to be empty. I stood there for what felt like hours, my nerves stretched thin, until finally the footsteps stopped. The silence returned, thick and suffocating, as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. I tried to convince myself it was an animal. A deer, maybe. But deep down, I knew better. No animal whispers your name. By 10 o'clock, I was sitting rigid inside the tent, the fire burned low, every snap of a twig outside making me flinch. I told myself if I could just close my eyes, just get some sleep, morning would come and all of this would seem stupid. But sleep wouldn't come. Because that's when the whisper started again. Closer this time. Right outside the thin fabric of my tent. Daniel. I held my breath, too afraid to move. The voice came again, softer, almost playful. Come out. And then, fingers. Dragging slowly across the side of my tent, from one corner to the other. Long, deliberate strokes, as though someone was tracing the outline of where I sat curled inside. That was the moment I realized I wasn't alone. I never had been. And the night was only just beginning. I don't know how long I sat frozen in that tent, listening to those fingers drag across the fabric. Time seemed to twist in the dark, minutes felt like hours, hours like whole lifetimes. Every instinct screamed at me not to move, not to breathe, not to let whatever was outside know I was aware of it. Finally, after what felt like forever, the sound stopped. The woods fell quiet again, heavy and waiting. I didn't dare unzip the flap. I just stayed there, clutching the flashlight with sweaty palms, my body trembling so hard I thought the whole tent would shake with me. That's when I remembered the old man at the gas station. The way he'd said, "Not those woods." The way his eyes had gone pale, distant, as if he was recalling something he wished he could forget. The Appalachians carry stories. They always have. I'd read about them once, in some half-forgotten article online, shadow people slipping between trees, voices that call your name in the dark, creatures older than any human settlement that still roam the ridges and hollers. Folks say the mountains don't like to be crossed at night, that the land itself keeps watch, and sometimes it doesn't let you leave. I had laughed at all of that. But now, sitting there with my heart hammering, I didn't feel like laughing anymore. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped. Not small, like a raccoon or a fox. Heavy. Like someone stepping wrong and breaking it under their boot. I forced myself to turn off the flashlight, plunging the tent into total darkness. Maybe, I thought, if I stayed quiet and still, whatever it was would move on. My ears strained for every sound, but the silence was worse than the noise. It was as if the whole forest was listening to me. And then I heard singing. Faint at first, carried on the breeze. A woman's voice, soft and lilting, like an old mountain lullaby. The kind you'd imagine a grandmother humming by the fire. But there was something wrong with it. The notes stretched too long, bending in ways that made my skin crawl. And it was close. Much too close. The voice drifted through the trees, circling, echoing in patterns that didn't make sense. Sometimes behind me, sometimes ahead, sometimes whispering right against the thin wall of the tent. I clamped my hands over my ears, but I could still hear it. Not just outside anymore. Inside. Inside my head. Daniel. I snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. I unzipped the tent in one frantic motion and burst out into the night, flashlight beams slicing wildly through the trees. Nothing. No woman. No singer. Just the endless forest, standing tall and silent under a sliver of moon. But then my light caught something. A shape. Tall. Too tall. Standing between the trees at the edge of the clearing. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just stood there, featureless and black, its outline rippling like heat on pavement. The second my beam touched it, the singing stopped. And then the shape stepped back, vanishing into the dark. That was when I realized I wasn't up against a person. I wasn't even up against something I could understand. I was standing on cursed ground. And the night still had hours left to go. The forest swallowed the figure whole. One moment it was there, a silhouette against the trees, and the next it was gone, leaving only the sound of my own ragged breathing. I told myself to get back in the tent, to stay put until morning, but the thought of crawling back inside that thin nylon cocoon made my skin crawl. The tent felt like a coffin now, too flimsy, too easy to tear through. Out here, at least, I had a little space to see things coming. My flashlight shook as I swept it across the trees. Every shadow seemed to twitch and breathe. My chest felt tight, my lungs refusing to draw in enough air. And then the footsteps started again. Not careful this time. Not circling. Charging. They came from every direction at once, branches snapping, leaves crunching, heavy thuds pounding the earth. I spun in place, light whipping around wildly, but I couldn't catch it. Whatever was moving out there was too fast. The singing came back too. Louder now. The same lullaby, but broken, warped, each note jagged as glass. And underneath it, whispers, dozens of them, overlapping, chanting my name in voices that weren't human. Daniel. 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 I bolted. I don't even remember deciding to run, my body just did it. I tore through the trees, branches slashing my arms, roots grabbing at my feet. The beam of my flashlight bounced over trunks and leaves, catching glimpses of things I couldn't comprehend, shapes too tall, arms too long, faces that weren't faces at all, watching from between the trees. The whispers chased me, weaving through the forest like smoke. Sometimes they were behind me, sometimes ahead, sometimes whispering directly into my ear though nothing was there. I stumbled into a clearing, lungs burning, legs trembling, and that's when I saw it. An old, rotting cabin. It sagged under its own weight, roof half caved in, windows black and empty like sockets. Every instinct told me not to go near it, but the forest behind me pulsed with something worse, something closing in. I didn't have a choice. I threw myself through the door. The wood groaned under my weight, dust exploding into the air. Inside was darkness thicker than night, broken only by my quivering beam of light. The place smelled of rotten earth, as if it had been abandoned for centuries. And yet, there were footprints on the floor. Fresh. Muddy. Leading deeper into the shadows. I followed them. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop myself. Each step felt guided, pulled by something I didn't understand. The prints led me to a corner where the floor had collapsed into a pit. My light trembled as I shined it down. At first I thought it was a nest. Bones piled high, some animal, some not. Skulls with empty eyes staring back up at me. And then I saw what sat among them. It was crouched low, limbs bent wrong, its back rising and falling in slow, unnatural movements. When the light touched it, the thing lifted its head. Its face, or what was left of it, was pale and stretched, skin too thin over bone, mouth split wide into something that wasn't a smile but wanted to be. Its eyes glowed faintly, milky and blind, but I knew without a doubt it saw me. The singing stopped. Silence fell so heavy it pressed against my ears. Then it spoke. Not in whispers. Not in song. But in my own voice. Daniel, you shouldn't have stayed the night. I staggered back, hitting the wall, the flashlight slipping from my grip. The beam spun crazily across the cabin until it landed on something scratched into the wood. Words. Over and over, gouged deep by desperate hands. Do not stay after dark. The same warning as the sign at the trailhead. The thing in the pit began to rise, bones cracking, limbs unfolding far too long for its body. It pulled itself toward me, moving like a spider learning to crawl. I didn't think. I ran. Burst out of the cabin, into the night, the whispers exploding around me in a frenzy. The forest seemed alive, trees leaning in, roots twisting underfoot, branches clawing at my clothes. The singing returned, louder, shrieking now, as though the whole mountain was screaming at me. And through it all, I could hear the thing behind me. Crawling. Gaining. I didn't know if I'd make it out. I didn't know if there was even a way out anymore. But I ran anyway, because if I stopped, even for a second, I knew it would have me. I don't know how long I lay frozen in that spot, my ears straining for any sound beyond my own frantic breathing. But the forest was alive now, alive in a way that made me feel like a trespasser in something ancient, something sacred or cursed. The night had swallowed me whole, and there was no denying it anymore. I wasn't alone out there. The silence broke again. Not with a snap or a whisper, but with a deep, rolling laugh. It wasn't loud. It wasn't human. It was low and guttural, like it bubbled up from the ground beneath me. It seemed to echo between the trees, bouncing back at me until I couldn't tell where it came from. Every hair on my body rose. My hand gripped the flashlight tighter, but I didn't dare turn it back on. Somehow, I knew the light would draw it closer. I thought about running, about crashing through the brush until I found the trail, but the memory of the things circling my camp kept me rooted in place. My only chance was to stay low, stay quiet, and pray the night passed without whatever was out there finding me. But the night was far from over. Minutes stretched into hours. Or maybe it was seconds. Time didn't feel real anymore. I shifted just slightly, trying to keep my legs from cramping, and the ground betrayed me. A twig cracked beneath my boot. The forest answered. A rush of movement exploded to my left, something massive tearing through the undergrowth with terrifying speed. I shot the flashlight in that direction before I could stop myself. The beam caught only a glimpse, two pale eyes reflecting the light, hovering at least 6 feet off the ground, too far apart to belong to anything I'd ever seen before. I screamed, the sound tearing itself from my throat before I could smother it. The eyes blinked out as the thing dropped lower, vanishing into the shadows. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my body was locked between fight and flight. That's when the voices started. They were faint at first, like children whispering at the edge of hearing. Then they grew clearer, overlapping, echoing in tones both male and female, young and old. They came from all directions, every tree carrying another voice, each one calling my name. Daniel. My stomach dropped. They knew me. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voices weren't just around me. They were inside me, threading through my skull like roots burrowing into soil. Daniel, stay with us. No one leaves the mountain. Just one night, that's all it takes. I stumbled backward, blind panic taking over. My shoulder slammed against the rough bark of a tree, and I used it to steady myself. I didn't care where I went anymore, I just needed to move. I ran. Branches clawed at my arms and face. Rocks shifted under my boots. My lungs burned with each ragged breath. Behind me, the forest roared to life, laughter and whispers and something heavier crashing through the dark. But no matter how far I ran, the voices followed. My lungs felt like they were tearing apart, but I couldn't stop running. Every instinct screamed that if I slowed down, if I dared to look back, whatever was chasing me would be there breathing down my neck, ready to drag me into the black belly of the forest. The voices didn't fade with distance. If anything, they grew louder, more insistent. Dozens now. Hundreds maybe. A chorus of Appalachian ghosts calling my name, stretching it until it warped into something inhuman. Daniel. Don't fight it. You came to us. I stumbled over a rock, falling hard against the ground. Pain shot up my knees, but I scrambled up, flashlight beam jittering wildly across the trees. That's when I saw it. The forest opened into a small clearing, and in the center stood a circle of stones. Not scattered, not random, placed. Each one waist-high, slick with moss, and carved with shapes I couldn't recognize. Spirals, jagged lines, crude faces with hollow eyes. My heart lurched as I realized, this wasn't nature. This was a shrine. And standing just beyond the stones was it. The eyes glowed first, pale white against the dark, like lanterns burning in the skull of something too tall, too thin. Its shape shifted as I stared, part man, part shadow, part animal hunched on crooked legs. Its head was crowned with twisted antlers that looked like they'd grown out of bone, splintered and raw. It didn't move toward me. It didn't need to. The thing only tilted its head, studying me the way a predator studies prey already trapped. The voices rose into a fever pitch, and I understood they weren't coming from the trees. They were pouring out of this thing's mouth, spilling into the forest, into me. My body seized with terror. My knees buckled, and I collapsed against one of the stones. The carvings beneath my hand felt warm, almost alive. And as I pressed against it, the voices shifted. For a single heartbeat, they screamed in pain. The creature staggered back, its antlered head jerking violently. My mind reeled. Whatever the circle was, it was a boundary. A prison. And I had just touched the lock. But then, the forest itself seemed to rebel. The wind rose out of nowhere, slamming into me so hard I nearly fell. Branches whipped like they wanted me out. Leaves spiraled through the air like claws. The ground beneath the shrine trembled, and the stones hummed with a deep vibration that rattled my teeth. The creature stepped closer again. Its hand, or what looked like a hand, emerged from the dark, impossibly long fingers curling in my direction. "Stay," the voices commanded in unison. "Stay, forever." I screamed and threw my flashlight. It clattered against the stones, beam spinning wildly before snapping off. Darkness swallowed everything, and in that pitch-black silence, I felt those fingers brush against my chest.